the Buddha taught 4 objects of mindfulness. First of all, the body. So that includes breathing, because breathing is something which is always with us. And also during the day, if we get agitated, if we get upset, if we get suddenly frazzled, we can just take a few deep breaths and be conscious of the breath going in and out, and it helps to calm the mind, bring us back into the present. So he, therefore, also, apart from breathing, he recommended the 4 postures, standing, sitting, walking, and lying down, that we should know when we are sitting, we are sitting. When we are walking, we are walking. So again, during the day, this is very useful because, first of all, we're always breathing, so we can always be aware of our breath. We don't have to look for it. There it is. The moment we think about our breath, we're with the breath. The moment we think about our posture, we're with the posture. So while we're walking down the street, or walking down the corridor, climbing stairs, we either know that or we don't. We're either aware of the body or we're not. Where did I leave my keys? Where did I put my glasses? I know I put my hat somewhere. You know? Unmindful. So again, during the day, we can bring our awareness, just the very simple things like the postures of the body. When we're sitting, to know we're sitting. Walking, we know we're walking. Standing, we know we're standing. And that also develops this ability to be aware, to be conscious, to wake up. So, this is shamatha meditation. Shamatha meditation also means, and look at the time, I don't want you to lose your lunch. Shamatha meditation also means watching the thoughts. Normally, when we think, we are swept along by our thoughts. We are our thoughts. We are like, if you think of thought as a river, then we're completely submerged and we're swept along. We and the thinking are the same. And so we go up and down, swept along by our feelings, our emotions, our ideas, our memories, our aspirations, our hopes, our fears, our whatever. Just blah, 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 blah. So, now, having honed the ability to be aware, then we turn that awareness onto the mind itself. And it is compared to like someone sitting on the banks of the river, watching the river go past. Instead of being swept along by the river, we are now on the banks watching river, like watching television. And like television, so boring. Very repetitious, same old soap operas being replayed again and again. Oh God, this is my mind. People get depressed. Because normally we are so caught up in our mind, we don't recognize actually how very uncreative our mind normally is. We programming the same old thing again and again and again, and just caught up in all our mental fixations. If we step out and we just observe them, then we can see that they're just moment to moment changing. I mean, you can't hold on to anything and say this is a good thought, because it's changed. In doing this, and in all meditation, one should be at the same time very relaxed, not tight. very relaxed, very spacious. When I was, for many years I lived in this Himalayan valley called Lahore. And below where I lived there was this meadow. And so in the summertime, the shepherd would bring up the flocks from the various villages. He would go around and then he would bring up, collect all the sheep and bring them up. And often he would be on that meadow. And he would bring the sheep up, and then there was this rock, and he would sit on the rock, get out his bottle of beer, lie out, and just lie there watching. And so the sheep would scatter and, graze. And by the end of the afternoon, they would all have just had enough to eat, and they would just be lying there, quiet. And then he would come down, round them all up, and take them down. And then one time, obviously he was sick or something, he was indisposed, and this boy came up. And obviously he had been told that if he lost a single sheep, he would be, God knows what would happen to him. So he was very, 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 very careful not to lose a single sheep. And so what he did was get all the sheep together in a big bunch. And he ran round and round and round. Every time a sheep tried to go off to eat something, back. And so he spent all day long just keeping the sheep together. These poor sheep, they had no chance to eat. They had no chance for anything. There's just a bunch of nervous sheep. And he was exhausted. And at the end of the day, he took them down because he hadn't lost any sheep. But the sheep were probably very hungry and not happy little sheep. And I thought, this is like meditation. Skillful, unskillful meditation. The unskillful is keeping everything very tight, got to concentrate, keep all the thoughts together, mustn't lose attention, get back in there. And the skillful way was like the old shepherd who just lay back, let the sheep wander, but he was not asleep. He was watching those sheep. If a wolf came, we had wolves. If a wolf came, he would be down in a moment. But as long as nothing was threatening, the sheep were able to just wander off. If they tried to go down too near the precipice again, he would call them back. But in general, they just wandered around, did their grazing, and then of themselves they settled down. Then he rounded them up, took home, back happy sheep, happy shepherd. So this is the point. When we watch the mind or any kind of shamatha meditation, it's very important not to tense up and try to, we've got to be single-pointed and concentrated. And so therefore there's this inner tension that anything might get out of hand and go off somewhere that I haven't noticed. Got to be attentive. So it's not like that. It's this open, spacious awareness of what's going on. Then, of itself, the mind begins to slow down. We don't have to try to. The thoughts are not an enemy. It's very important that we shouldn't think that thoughts are the problem. It's not the thoughts that are the problem. It's our lack of attention that is the problem. And the fact that we're swept along by our thoughts and we identify with our thoughts. This is me. This is who I am. This is my problem. This is the trouble. This is why it's very important to learn how to observe the mind. Everybody, I'm sure the Buddha somewhere said it, but certainly Padmasambhava, Milarepa, and Tsongkhapa, and everybody else said, the essence of the practice is to observe the mind. Because once we observe the mind, we can see they're just thoughts. They're not me. They're not mine. Why are we so identified? And then that gives an inner space. Then, again, all of this is shamatha with an object. Once our ability to really be aware, to be mindful, is very clear, that sense of inner presence, it's very strong, then we can drop the object. The breath, the thoughts, the sensations, whatever we've been observing, we drop that. And then we are just aware of being aware. There's just that sense of open, spacious clarity, knowingness of the mind without any specific object. Whatever comes in goes out. I mean, again, one can think of various analogies. One is like if you think of an empty room with windows and doors on all sides, open, no furniture, an empty room, then whatever comes in, birds, bees, mosquitoes, flies, anything that comes in there just goes out again. There's nothing to hit against. It's just open. Another example which the Tibetans like is that of an eagle flying. Because if you think of big birds like eagles or vultures, then when they fly, they're just flying. Little birds have to flap their wings, right? I mean, they have to make a lot of effort to get up there. But eagles, once they're up there, they're kept up by the undercurrents, and they're just sailing along. No effort. But they're totally focused. They are not asleep. Their minds are very, very clear and focused on their next meal. But they're present. So that's how the mind should be. No efforts, just open, spacious, kept up by the undercurrents. So shamatha is very important as a basis. The Buddha always emphasized how important it was to have strong shamatha, because once the mind is tamed, then everything else comes about very easily. It's like if we have a wild horse, then you can see this wild horse and think, wow, this horse is a beautiful horse. It has tremendous potential. But we cannot train it because it hasn't been tamed. So first, I mean, you say, well, you want it to go left, it will go right. You want it to go forward, it will stop. You want it to stop, it will go forward. I mean, it's not going to do what we want. Why? Because it is not tamed. Once the wild horse is tamed, then it can be trained. But it cannot be trained until it's tamed. And then how to tame it? Well, we can beat it into submission, and it will be, submissive, but a very unhappy horse who will try to get its own back as soon as it can. Or we can make friends. We can show the horse that we don't mean it harm, that, actually we could be friendly together, it would be very nice, you're a lovely horse. And then the horse begins to think, okay, maybe being trained might be fun. And it's willing then. Having made friends and trusting, then it's willing to be trained. and then begins to enjoy the training. So it's very much like the mind. We can force the mind to be very concentrated. But again and again, one reads accounts of people who did that and, took it all very seriously and were absolutely, they've only got a month, so they'd better get it together, I think, enlightenment, we should manage that. After all, we got 30 days. And so they are very, very up at 3, 3-hour sessions, why waste time? And in the beginning it goes okay, and then suddenly at the middle it all just explodes. And they often end up far worse conditioned than they were before, because they're forcing. And they are suppressing the mind rather than working with the mind, befriending the mind, and allowing the mind to reveal its own potential. So don't do that. I mean, even just recently I was reading an account of someone who was very, very strict, really very, and ended up completely messing himself up, and it took a long time for him to recover. And again, you read these accounts. People are very keen and don't want to waste time, and always the books are saying, don't waste time, blah, blah, blah. But tensing up is not the way to go. Really, to learn how to relax the mind and keep the mind open, spacious, but at the same time, completely aware. To have that like an eagle. It is very important in shamatha, because the mind then of itself naturally will calm down. And if we are watching the mind, then slowly of itself, as our awareness gets stronger, then of itself naturally the thought chain begins to go slower. We don't have to make it go slower. It of itself will naturally do this. We don't even have to want it to do this. If we wanted to do it, it won't. Right. But if we relax and just say, who cares, this is the entertainment program, switch it on, okay, what's happening today? And just watch what's going on in our mind. Then as we begin to become more settled and more clear and just watching the movie, of itself, naturally, gradually, it will sometimes begin to slow down, even to the point where if our attention is very, very clear, then there is a gap between the past thought and the future thought. And in that gap, if we are very relaxed and present, we can glimpse the nature of the mind, which they're going to be dealing with in the next 2 verses. So it's like in sky, if you have all these clouds, thick clouds, one cloud after the other, we look there and all we see is clouds. But then for a moment the clouds may part and there's the blue sky. Actually, it's not all clouds, there's actually sky. So this realization of the sky is, of course, what the whole practice is about. And the next verses will be dealing with that more. But in order to really stabilize our practice, we have to learn to cultivate the ability to be aware, because everything depends on that. I mean, nowadays, of course, mindfulness is, the big buzzword. And everybody's learning to be mindful. Buddhism talks about right mindfulness and wrong mindfulness, because, of course, mindfulness is part of the whole path. So, I mean, if you're a burglar, you're mindful. But that would be regarded as wrong mindfulness, because it's based on a root, on a unethical root. It's based on the root of greed, basically. And so therefore, even though you might be exemplarily mindful, it's not going to lead to enlightenment. And the whole point of our learning to cultivate this aware quality of the mind is to recognize the true nature of our mind, and that is awakening. So we start by this practice of shamatha. Of course, traditionally they go into very deep levels of shamatha, called the jhanas. But even without that, it's a foundation on which everything else will be built. Without that, we cannot really. It's like I look, sometimes in our nunnery we have this very fancy temple with all these frescoes and images and everything, and people go in there and go, wow. It's a wow temple. But I know it is based on very deep foundations. And while we were digging those foundations, which took months and months, nobody was excited about our foundations. Look at these fantastic foundations. Aren't you impressed? All they see is a big hole. They were not impressed. And yet, the temple rests on those foundations. Without very deep, strong foundations, within no time at all, the rest of the building would develop cracks and damp and all sorts of things. The fact that we are sure that this temple will last for many, many, many years is because we know it rests on good foundations. And this is true also very much for our Dharma practice. That all these wonderful fancy meditations, all the tantric meditations and all the Dzogchen and Mahamudra and all these very nice, wow, wonderful. But an untamed mind cannot do it. Very wonderful, yes. But unless we have cultivated strong foundations, then we cannot do these practices. And so, it's not that they're just the, preliminaries. I mean, they pervade everything which comes afterwards. Either we have a well-trained mind or we don't. So it's not something that we should think about skipping through that quickly to get to the good stuff. This is the good stuff. So all of these qualities which we need to get the mind to be able to take the Dharma onto the path. Because they're dealing with the actual mind, not just with outer show. Our minds, the whole point is that our mind has to change. If our mind changes, our speech and our actions likewise will change naturally. But if we just try to change our outer actions and our speech, but our mind is not transforming, it doesn't work. Might fool people for a while, but it's not going to fool anybody for any much time. And what's the point anyway? Who do we want to fool? I mean, this is very important. So, I mean, here, of course, you are all looking like ordinary people, but people who go to India, they especially if they go to Dharamshala, etc., they really want to integrate themselves with the culture around them. So they, go around in these strange things, hoping that they'll look like everybody else. And, outwardly, covered in malas and, your prayer wheel and, But, the point is not our outer appearance. The important thing is our inner state of mind. I say to our nuns always, don't think that shaving your head and wearing robes makes you a nun. or a Dharma practitioner. It's your mind that counts, not what your outer appearance is just a reminder. But the important thing is, do you have a Dharma mind? Has your mind gone on the path, meaning that the Dharma, what you are practicing, actually is on the path towards enlightenment? Because one can sit for days, months, years reciting mantras, but if it's not affecting the mind, the quality of our awareness and our compassion, then it's not fun. So outwardly looks very good, but inwardly it's empty, and empty in a negative sense. Doesn't have any value. So this is why it's very important to take refuge, take bodhisattva vow, and really make efforts in shamatha practice to get the mind quietened down and beginning of the training. And at the same time, with the bodhisattva vow, to open up our hearts to recognize that just as we wish for happiness, all beings wish for happiness. Not just human beings. Animals, insects, fish, all beings. Animals don't want to suffer. And animals feel suffering the same as we do. We are animals. We are animals. We are very, very connected with the animal kingdom, far more than many people want to admit. We're not that special. Much of our brain is the same as an animal's brain. We have a bit more of a neocortex or something, but beyond that, so much of our brain is identical with most animals. And animals are often much more in tune with their feelings than we are. As we know, that's why people like animals, because they can trust them. So, the first step of bringing the Dharma onto the path is a very, very important thing. All the practices we are doing, the books we are reading, and so forth, is this really, really transforming our heart? Or not? Are we just knowing more? We can quote all the names. We've read all the books. We've gone to all the talks. We've met all the teachers. Has anything changed inside? Or not? This really is the crucial point. That we have to not only turn our mind to the Dharma, but make sure the Dharma is going on the path. It's actually leading somewhere, not just going around in circles, getting more and more knowledge, and not really working. It's supposed to transform us. So this is a very important. These two parts are dealing with, really making sure that we know where we're going and that we are going somewhere. Because otherwise we can just it's just another, ego game. Right now I know all the lineages and the differences, and I've read all the best books, and I've gone to all the best talks, and I've done all this, and I've done that, and it's just, what Trungpa Rinpoche called spiritual materialism. Right? We get more and more, and the ego gets more and more polished. It's not about polishing the ego. It's not about making a lovely, beautiful Dharma ego. So we have to be careful. Check. And the best way to check is in daily life. When people do things which we don't want, say things we don't want, things don't go the way I want, and they do go the way I don't want, we should be grateful, because that shows us how much the Dharma is or is not actually merged with our minds. The Buddha said that dukkha, suffering, the unsatisfactory nature, is due to, first of all, birth, old age, sickness, death, but also getting what we don't want and not getting what we do want. And so to see, when things do not go the way I want them to go, how do we react? That way this is much more helpful than when things go the way we want them to go. In which case, of course, we're lovely. Such nice people. But it's when things don't go the way I want them to go. That's when we can see whether or not our mind is really becoming one with the Dharma. So, therefore, it's very important to recognize that daily life is the practice. And daily life is how daily life is. It's not always the way I would like it to be. It just is. So how are we dealing with that? Skillfully or unskillfully? That way we know whether or not our Dharma, our understanding of Dharma, really is helping us on the path or not. Very important. For all of us, I mean, really. Whether or not we consider ourselves Buddhist or not Buddhist or whatever, it's not the point. The point is our minds really flowering into a genuine understanding of what we are here to accomplish? Or are we just wasting our time yet again? As the teacher said, the criteria is whether our negative emotions are growing less or more, or it's staying the same. And if they're staying the same, or if they're getting even worse, we're more irritable, we're more upset, we're more greedy or selfish or thinking me the whole time, then there's no point. No matter what we've been doing, it hasn't really helped. So, okay, I think I have to let you go off for lunch. And we will continue. The second part is mostly about dealing with, with the nature of the mind and nature of reality.